tell me about yourself. Who is Damian Degenova?
Well, I don't know. I'm a lawyer, grew up in Poland, and I've been living in Springfield since I got back from law school in 1994, Springfield Township. Started practicing law in Struthers with Clementi and Wagner when I first graduated from law school. Stayed there for a few years, and now I've been downtown with this law firm for Degenova and Yarwood for 15 years or so, 17 maybe.
How long have you been in practice?
Since 94.
You have your own practice, successful.
Yeah.
Why take on a part-time judgeship like this?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. And one of the reasons is, like I said, I grew up in Poland, live in Springfield. My family, my dad, and obviously my grandfather was from Struthers. My dad had a office in Struthers from the mid-50s until he retired in the 90s, I think. And my brother has that same office from 1986, I think, up to the present day. So now they were dentists. My brother's still a dentist. My dad was a dentist. He passed away. But so the jurisdiction of the court, Struthers, Poland, Springfield, have a connection to all of those areas. And it's a pretty, deep family connection. The other reason, the specific reason for wondering, or when you're wondering why would I want to take on position as a part-time judge, the judges that we have, we're kind of blessed in this community because we have some very diligent, hardworking judges, especially at the county level and the common pleas level. And I think that one of the things that can happen in a community court, like in a municipal court, like Struthers, is the court can either be a hindrance or it can, help promote the area in the way that it treats its citizens and the programs that it has in place, and whether or not, people feel like the connection to their local government is helpful to them or as a disadvantage. Most people only have connection with either the taxman or the police, sometimes the court systems. And those connections should be a connection that the people can feel comfortable with. I'm not certain that everybody feels comfortable when they go into court, and you need to make that available to them.
So this is kind of helping the community that you have ties to, but also providing this as a service to those that have to, the users of that court.
Yeah, not everybody that uses the court is, in criminal trouble or something. I mean, a lot of people, obviously, there's a lot of criminal connection to the court, traffic connection. People have connection to the court when they get a traffic ticket, or if there's some type of a criminal or domestic violent situation going on. But also, there's just civil contractual cases, landlord-tenant cases, small claims cases, dispute over fees with mechanics, and people need to be able to feel comfortable and they have a place that they can go to resolve their issues without resorting to self-help.
Beyond the obvious, you have James Lanzo, who's in that position for all these years, and I think he's only the second judge to sit there. Why so much interest in this? I mean, you're an announced candidate in a primary with no race, really.
Right.
But you have 3 Democrats that are running for it as well. Your name is going to be circulated for the next number of months.
Right.
Why so much interest in this race?
Well, I mean, obviously, I can't speak for the Democratic hopefuls. They'll have to speak for themselves. From my position, from my point of view, the reason I'm interested in it is just what I told you, make it available to the community. I have always been very heavily involved in following politics anyway. So even as a young person, prior to even being graduating high school, I was very interested in politics. Friends would follow sports. They had favorite sports teams. They had favorite politicians, I guess. So it's kind of always been my, the inner workings of government have always been kind of my hobby. This is my opportunity to contribute to the inner workings of government. I think as a broader perspective, the reason there's so much interest in it is it's an open seat. And it doesn't happen very often that there is a open seat for a judgeship. I mean, once a lot of people get elected, they stay there for a long time. Like you were talking about, Judge Lanzo's been there for maybe 25 years or so. I'm not certain, but he's been there for a long time, and it doesn't happen very often where there's an open seat.
What would you, if there was something, see that as part of your service in this and making this more accommodating to those that use it? What changes might you like to see in that court?
All right. So the court runs pretty well. And what I mean by that is the current judge has kept things in the black. He has it so that the court pays for itself and has some funds. There are different things that I would like to see done. In other words, in some courts you can file, for the lawyers anyway, so you can file paperlessly, in other words, just electronically on the internet. That seems to be the way of the future. It's not something that's been implemented down in Struthers. Hasn't been implemented in a lot of other places, but I'd like to see that happen there. You ought to be able to have easier access to the actual court docket online. You should be able to go on and look at the filings, get a copy, print off a copy of the filings, and have a more paperless environment. Can't probably ever be 100% paperless. The second part of it is there are, and drug courts have been tried and failed, but we have a very successful veterans court down in Youngstown, and I'd like to try to, Youngstown Municipal Court, and I'd like to try to implement something like that over in Struthers. A lot of people, veterans have done a lot for us. I'm not a veteran, I was not in the military, but I have a lot of friends that were. They've sacrificed. I think that they deserve every opportunity they can, and the way that the veterans courts seem to be working out is that we'll give these people the opportunity to show that that day and time in their life is not a defining moment in their life. So I'd like to see that happen. But more importantly, as I was saying before, what I want is people to feel comfortable when they walk into that court, that it's a environment where they don't have to feel out of place, or they don't have to feel like they're intruding or they're in trouble for just walking in the door. I want it to be a more welcoming environment than it is now. Courts can be a scary place for people.
What do you bring to this that perhaps the others don't?
Well, I'll just, again, speak for myself. The three Democratic candidates are, hopeful candidates, are all friends of mine. I know each one of them, and I have relationships with each one of them, and I consider them friends, and they consider me a friend, I think. So I'll let them speak for themselves. My personal abilities that I bring, or my resume, I guess I've been practicing since '94, running a successful law office. I was the Struthers assistant prosecutor in the late 90s. I've been a county prosecutor, worked for Paul Gaines at the juvenile division. I did that for several years, 5 or 6 years. And I was the Pullen Village solicitor, I believe 8 years. And I'm the current, right now, since 2002, the magistrate in Struthers Municipal Court. So I think out of all of the potential candidates, on the Democratic side, I think that my resume stacks up against any of them.
There's been a lot of talk, as I'm sure you're aware. Supreme Court's talked about it. The local bar has talked about it, of consolidating the courts. Do we need a Struthers court and a Campbell court and a Youngstown court and 4 area courts and all of that? What are your thoughts on consolidation, given that over the course of your term, Struthers Court might not exist anymore as we see it today, if they were able to do that?
Right. Well, all right. So the argument about consolidation is typically a monetary argument. We should consolidate, Camel and Struthers and bringing in with Boardman or whatever it takes in order to save taxpayers money, in order to not spend more money on duplicating services. The flip side of that is that if we had for instance, if we had one county court where you had to go to for all your disputes, well, that person may, instead of being able to go to Sebring Court, would have to maybe drive to Youngstown. Or if you're in Struthers, now you're no longer having your case heard in Struthers, but you have to go somewhere else. So it's a convenience factor as far as having individual courts. Also, typically the players, in other words, the clients, the people that are in court the plaintiffs and defendants, the people that are in court trying to get their cases heard and get something decided are from that local area. And they know the people, and they're going to be the same people that are on juries, for instance. So they're going to be their friends and neighbors. So there's arguments on both sides, whether we should consolidate, save money, or whether it makes more sense to have a more local environment.
Well, basically, it comes down to convenience for the users of the court,
Which are the citizens.
as opposed to whatever money maybe they'll save.
Yeah, but it's not only users. It's not only convenience. If as an overall belief system in government, the more power you consolidate in one area, the more difficult it is to get an individual's side of the story heard. In other words, if you live in Poland Village, you can go directly to the mayor or to village council. If there was no mayor or village council and there was only county government, then you would have to come down and deal with the commissioners. And if there were no commissioners, then you'd have to go drive down to Columbus. And if there's no Columbus, because we've consolidated everything in a federal government, we have to go to Washington, D.C. The farther away the governmental entity, whether it's a court, whether it's a mayor, farther away that governmental entity gets from your front porch, the less voice you have with that governmental agency. So consolidation of any of the governmental services is probably something that I'm not 100% behind.
I was going to say, if you had to balance what sounds like the three legs of that stool between the power in one particular court, the finances, and the convenience, I'm guessing you're not a fan necessarily of consolidating for consolidating's sake.
I'm not a fan of consolidating for consolidating's sake. And probably what would happen is they would consolidate. They would have maybe a few judges with bigger dockets, which would therefore extend the amount of time that it takes to get into court. Which obviously, court system was at a very slow pace, and I think that the larger the docket for those individual judges, the farther out those cases are going to be, the less satisfied the end user is going to be with that court system. So, yeah, consolidation for consolidation's sake, I think, probably is counterproductive. You're going to save money, but the service is going to be is not going to be up to par as it now.
This is a question I'm asking all four of you. If you've been in this community for more than a minute and a half, you see the blood sport that politics is in this county.
Right.
You're kind of on the outside looking in, at least through the primary process, but are you concerned that, like so many other races, when you get to November, it becomes something other than two people with the community in mind running for a position, that it turns into this political back and forth?
Well, obviously, you don't want any or your opponent to be, saying things about you that aren't true. Obviously, anything, I guess, is fair game. I can tell you that it's not going to come from my side. The reason it's not going to come from my side is I just don't have it in me. I'm just not that fellow that is going to point at another person and say, you have failed, and you have failed in this way. It's just not who I am. It's not how I was raised, not how I was brought up. If those accusations or some accusations are pointed at me, then I'll answer accusations, and the best way I know how, but I'm probably be hard pressed to see me give the accusations. I think the broader question is why would you get involved in something where you know people are going to be throwing mud at you, telling half truths, and whatever. I'm hopeful that the people that are in the race, no matter who gets the nomination on the Democratic side, decides that that's not how they want to run the race.
Are there, aside from modernizing the court and making it, I guess, more user-friendly, for lack of a better way to describe it, are there other things that you see that could be done differently? I don't want you in a position where you're criticizing Judge Lanzo necessarily, but are there other things that you see that could be done differently that, again, maybe set you apart from?
Yeah. Well, one of the issues that the end user, and you know, speaking from a lawyer's perspective, a lot of cases and a lot of courts set their cases all at the same time. So it's Monday morning, it's 9 o'clock, every case is set at 9 o'clock. Well, obviously, not everybody is going to get in front of the judge or speak to the prosecutor or have their civil action start at 9 o'clock. It's not possible. So what some courts do, and we'd like to implement this, is they just have different times. In other words, there's so many cases set at 9, there's so many cases set at 10, there's so many cases set at 11. That way you don't have what we call a cattle call, where everybody's sitting around and just waiting. That breeds dissatisfaction with the end user, who is either a fellow get traffic ticket or somebody that wants to have their civil case heard, wherever it is. We don't want to breed that dissatisfaction unnecessarily. I mean, obviously, if you're working with any agency, especially a governmental agency, there's going to be delays, there's going to be times where you can't have your case heard, but there's no reason to set the system up for failure.
Is there anything we haven't touched on that you would want to get out?
I pretty much covered it.
Yeah, I don't know that there's anything that there's a specific thing other than what we've talked about with the Veterans Court and whatnot that I want to get out, except to say that one of the things that people need to have, especially in today's day and age, which with the way national politics are, they have to have confidence in their governmental officials, whether they're a judge, whether they're a magistrate, whether they're the mayor. At this point in time, there's such a great divide in this country, it seems, at the national level and the local level. Whoever takes those positions of power and is granted that ability is going to have to be somebody that really and truly is going to be looking out for the best interest of the citizenry, or we're never going to repair the divide. At this point in time, like I said, I've followed politics my whole life. I mean, there used to be Democrats and Republicans, and they were friends. And now there's Democrats and Republicans, and they're enemies. And I think that there's a call for, there needs to be a call for a little less of the harsh rhetoric. And I think that's one of the reasons, not the only reason, obviously, that I'm very hopeful that the people that are in this race are going to try to tone it down a little bit and not make accusations that, you know, aren't true or